So, Dr. Stephen Southwick is a recognized expert on the psychological and neurobiological effects of extreme psychological trauma. Dr. Southwick is the inaugural Greenberg Professor of Psychiatry, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, and Resilience at the Yale Medical School and at the Yale Child Study Center, Adjunct Professor of Psychiatry at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and Medical Director of the Clinical Neuroscience Division of the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. He has worked with a wide range of trauma survivors, including combat veterans, civilian children and adults with PTSD, and very high-functioning, stress-resilient former prisoners of war and active duty special forces soldiers and Navy SEALs. And so today I want to pull from his book, Resilience, The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges. I'll tell you, this book is so well written, so well researched. Every example I'm about to share with you today, we'll just discuss a little blurb on the 10 factors that build resilience. But each one I share with you is thoroughly researched with a lot of supported data and amazing case studies. If this is a field that interests you, or if you've struggled with any kind of traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress, I highly recommend you pick up this book. It's amazing, fascinating research. So let's talk a little bit about resilience. And as we talk here, you're going to find out why Dr. Southwick was a keynote speaker at a logotherapy conference. It's amazing. I don't know if he read Frankl first and then found PTSD, or, well, I mean, we know, if you've listened for a while, you can see how all of these things probably interrelate. But what is resilience? It's a complex, multi-dimensional, and dynamic in nature. Experts define resilience in a variety of ways, but there's a common thread, or several common threads in their definitions. It's the ability to weather adversity. And boy, have we needed some resilience in the past few years, haven't we? It does not mean being impervious to adversity, but a resilient person may be deeply affected by a traumatic event and may experience psychological symptoms such as depression, recurrent intrusive memories, or hypervigilance. But it does mean being able to carry on with the important facets of one's life in spite of painful and distressing symptoms, or even full-blown PTSD. In some definitions, resilience also entails the ability to grow from adverse events and find meaning in them. That's like right out of Man's Search for Meaning, isn't it? And here we have clinical, well-researched data to support all that we've been talking about here on the podcast, and what we find in the field of logotherapy. So what the researchers found, and what this book goes through and highlights, are 10 factors that promote resilience, or that resilient people exhibit. And so from the book, it says the individuals that were interviewed confronted their fears. They maintained an optimistic but realistic outlook on life, sought and accepted social support, and imitated sturdy role models. Most also relied upon their own inner moral compass, turned to religious or spiritual practices, and found a way to accept that which they could not change. Many attended to their health and well-being and trained intensively to stay physically fit and work on their well-being, mental sharpness, and emotional strength. Most were active problem solvers who were looking for meaning and opportunity in the midst of adversity, and sometimes even found humor in the darkness. Finally, all the resilient people we interviewed accepted, to an impressive degree, responsibility for their own emotional well-being. And many used their traumatic experiences as a platform for personal growth. I feel like that paragraph there summarizes in some ways the past 50 episodes of the Meaning Project. So many things are that we've addressed in different ways that they are finding, that Dr. Southwick and his partner, Dennis Charney, proved through research, proved through interviews throughout this book. There are some a lot of references to Vietnam POWs and military search and rescue training. A lot of, as you can see, or as I said, Dr. Southwick worked a lot with the military, but then also individuals and families struggling with PTSD, with different traumatic events. Going through that list, one of the most important parts to understand is that you can train for resilience, right? This is not just something that happens or just is a spontaneous occurrence, but it's something we can train for. When we think about the military, one of the key concepts that should come to mind is the intense training that they go through just to get started. But then as you specialize in the military, the intensity of different trainings is quite important. And so this book boils down a lot of those ideas. So I want you to keep that in mind, but also the idea, there's a lot of neuroscience throughout the book. I'm going to try to avoid some of the deeper parts of that. You can read that on your own if you'd like. But one of the key components of neuroscience that we're finding in the past few decades is this idea of neuroplasticity. And I think I've mentioned it before sometimes. That idea that the brain can change and adapt and grow regardless of age. And that no matter what age you are, we can learn and develop new skills. Sometimes it may be a little harder based on age, but it's still possible. They talk about neuroplasticity here and the idea that brain structure is neither fixed nor static, but instead highly plastic. And like muscles in the body, the brain can be strengthened or weakened depending on how you use it. You can strengthen your brain or you can weaken it. So depending on how you use it, how often you use it, what you do, when cells in the brain are actively used, they transmit their messages more efficiently and form more connections with other cells. On the other hand, when brain cells are not stimulated, they die and are pruned away. As with other regions of the body, the well-known adage, use it or lose it, also applies to the brain. And I think we talk about that a lot here. The more you engage in responsible action, creative endeavors, experiences in life, the healthier you are. But now we have scientific proof, well, more scientific proof that it helps you. It causes your brain to grow and function better. He goes on to say that if we can learn to harness stress, it can serve as a catalyst for developing greater strength and even greater wisdom. If we take the stress that we so often complain about and are frustrated by and use it, turn it into achievement, learn different ways to deal with it, it makes us better. So let's talk about the 10 factors that they found that contribute to resilience. The first one is fairly easy, fairly obvious in some ways. It's just having an attitude of optimism, right? Knowing that things are going to be okay. It's that attitude of no matter what the situation, I can choose my attitude and I can choose positivity. It's interesting. The book talks about pessimists first. Compared to optimists, people who are chronically anxious or pessimistic have a tendency to focus on potential negative or threatening stimuli and avoid focusing on potentially positive situations. Watch out, guys. Here's the scary part. They are captivated by bad news, tend to view ambiguous situations as threatening, constantly keep an eye out for possible threats and dangers, and vividly picture what might go wrong in any particular situation. Right? So does the pessimist come first, or does the environment create a pessimist? Either way, it's a choice. Not engaging in bad news, not always surfing the internet or watching for bad news on TV, maintaining a positive attitude. On the other hand, while non-anxious or optimistic people notice and pay attention to relevant negative information, they are drawn toward pleasant or positive stimuli and easily imagine what can go right. It's a choice, right? We can choose negativity and pessimism, or we can choose to find the positive or to seek out the positive. Recognize there is negativity, negative situations in the world, but we can choose to look at the positive. It's choice. It's not saying have a Pollyanna attitude. It's saying look for the positive. I believe, oh boy, I could be totally wrong with this. I think it's a Mr. Rogers quote. that said, always look for the heroes. There are always heroes. There's always positive, even in negative situation. You can be one of those heroes by maintaining positivity in difficult situations. It goes on to say, when pessimists face stressful situations, they tend to exaggerate their appraisal of threat, blame or criticize themselves, underestimate their capacities, and overgeneralize the nature and extent of the problem. On the other hand, when threatened or challenged, optimists tend to contain their appraisal of threat, create positive appraisals about themselves, and focus on their strengths. Pessimists and optimists tend to employ opposite explanatory styles in good times too. In response to good events, pessimists often view their gains as temporary and specific to the particular event itself, while optimists, on the other hand, generally anticipate long-standing and widespread benefits. So you can choose your attitude, choose how you relate to life in difficult situations, and it will help your overall health and brain health. So here are 4 ways to become more optimistic. Here's the 4 action items you can take with you. Focus attention on the positive things around you. Every situation, right? If we talk about logotherapy's meaning of the moment, there's always the opportunity to find positive meaning. Intentionally think positive thoughts and do not dwell on negative thoughts, right? We aren't always in control of our first thought, but if negative thoughts pop up, you can change it. You are in charge of your mind. I just had that conversation this week with somebody saying, that their eating behavior was obsessive and compulsive, that they would fixate on a food until they satisfied that need and ate that food. I said, well, why don't you just change the thinking? They said, I can't. And that's where we talked about being in control of our own minds. We've talked about the elephant and the rider example, but also great song with Jocko Willink by Akira the Don. I mean, Jocko just pretty much, it's called Mind Control. I highly recommend you look it up. He just says, if you want to stop eating sugar, stop eating sugar, right? And goes through all these other examples of opportunities for us to control our own mind instead of give in to saying, well, I just can't do it. Reframe the negative and interpret events in a more positive light, and behave and take action in ways that build positive feelings. These are ways that you can become more optimistic. And in doing that, you improve your ability to be resilient in the face of difficult times. Factor 2 talks about facing our fears, right? And I think that is a lot of what I do in helping people, encouraging them to deal with anxiety. Too often we medicate away anxiety by numbing ourselves out and avoiding it. And guess what? The anxiety gets worse. The fear becomes greater because we're not attending to it. But when we attend to it, when we put ourselves in those situations, that fear becomes lesser. When we, and let me correct that, when we put ourselves in situations to face that fear and to succeed, to have positive support, to be successful in small increments and gradually getting greater, we get better at it. One of the best examples is public speaking. If you hate public speaking and it makes you sick and want to throw up and you fear it, then go do public speaking. Start out with a small group, a local Rotary Club, and then gradually get bigger. And you'll find we're all still a little nervous before public speaking, but it becomes easier. And maybe if you want, you can learn to enjoy it. So facing our fears, part of the science behind that, the neuroscience of facing our fears, is, the neuroscience of extinction. That comes right out of cognitive behavioral therapy. But oh my goodness, they list so many brain structures here. I don't want to go too deep into it because, quite honestly, I don't even know all those brain structures. To extinguish a fear-conditioned memory, a person must be exposed to the fear-inducing stimulus in a safe environment. And this exposure needs to last long enough for the brain to form a new memory. This new memory conveys that the fear conditioned stimulus is no longer dangerous in the present environment. I remember back years ago in my grad school days, one of the cognitive behavioral treatments for anxiety or phobias was what we call systematic desensitization. And the example I always remember is if you were afraid of spiders and needed to conquer that, although now today we know that that's hardwired into our system, evolutionary, but if there was something you were afraid of, you would introduce it in a safe way, and realize that it hasn't killed you, right? So we'll say it's snakes or spiders, or you look at a picture of a spider, and then maybe you're in a room with the spider, and then maybe the spider is near you, and then eventually you're holding the spider and realizing that you can survive these things. Well, that goes the same with any other kind of anxiety or fear. The more we expose ourselves to it in a safe and healthy way, enlisting the help of a therapist or family members, we will eventually conquer it. And now the amazing thing from this book is that it's not just a cognitive, right? It's just not a behavioral thing, but there's actual brain science behind it. You change your brain, you improve your brain, you create new neural pathways when you engage in these behaviors, when you work through fear. So they go on to say that you can't let any fear hang around too long, and fear being also defined as chronic stress. And this was done in some great animal, I believe it was ape studies by Robert Sapolsky, an amazing National Geographic, I think, show on anxiety and stress in monkey studies, and how there are hierarchies, how the stress of being low on the monkey hierarchy, and ironically they translated this to public employees in Europe, I won't tell you what country, that under chronic stress the brain changes, the brain is weaker. We see symptoms of chronic stress being stomach aches, stomach upsets and diarrhea, overeating, weakening of the immune system, insomnia, decreased interest in physical activity, decreased sex drive, anxiety, and depression. Chronic stress, when not dealt with, when not faced, can lead to all of these things. And I know for me, well, I mean, again, that's the bias of being in my office all day long. I see these things all the time. And if you're experiencing these because of chronic stress, face the stress or change the stress, right? That's, I tell a lot of clients, there are two ways of dealing with stress. You either have to go at it head on and overcome that, or you have to change what the stressor is coming from. And if it's a work situation, there's definitely some thinking that needs to be done there. What can be done? They go on to talk about facing fear. Kind of, this is the summary, or the what you can do about it. Just as the military designs its training to strengthen members and foster growth by pushing its members beyond their current level of comfort, numerous civilian organizations do the same. Examples include outward bound wilderness expeditions, police and fire academy training, high school and college athletic teams, and challenging educational programs. Fear is ubiquitous. No one escapes its grip. But what is the best way to deal with it? The bottom line is the best way around fear. Holy cow, I forgot I outlined this. I've said this so many times. The best way around fear is through it. To conquer fear, one must face fear. That is what resilient people do. If we take anxiety as a derivative of fear, the best way over it is through it. The best way to heal it is to go through it. And so these are some things that you can take with you by overcoming fear and stress now, in the face of difficult situations in life, in the face of a potential traumatic event. You condition yourself and your brain to be better prepared. So factor 3, excuse me, let me take a quick sip of coffee here from my, that's right, The Meaning Project podcast coffee mug, which can be yours in many different colors. This one I got because it's kind of blue, but we got, I believe on the website it's called the early morning one because it's very bright colors, or maybe it's the early morning one is the black one. I'm not sure. Maybe this is the mid-morning coffee cup. But Let's see. Factor 3, moral compass, right? Taking responsible action. There's a few points here that I'll go through that, as listeners to the Meaning Project podcast, I'm sure you may have heard before. In our interviews, we found that resilient individuals possessed a keen sense of right and wrong that strengthened them during times of extreme stress and afterwards, right? It's having a moral code, a moral compass. And as they adjusted to life as they adjusted to life following trauma, another pillar of their value systems was altruism, selflessness, concern for the welfare of others, and giving to others with no expectation of benefit to the self. And the next bit of this chapter goes right into stories of Vietnam POWs and the Hanoi Hilton, and how they helped each other, how they supported each other even when they couldn't be in contact, and how they viewed right and wrong. And sorry, I got lost here on what I was looking for. How they viewed right and wrong and standing by that moral code. And that's something we can work on. But I would say it almost has to be in place before any kind of trauma, right? You have to develop that sense of morality and right and wrong before difficult things happen, because in my mind, that's almost something you have to call on immediately in difficult situations. What do I see as right? What do I see as wrong? How do I maintain myself and my code in this situation, but still maintain an attitude of optimism and positivity? And so how do you develop a moral code? You think about it, you read about it, you put yourself in situations where you have to maybe even discuss it. But one way is factor 4. One way we develop a moral compass, a moral code, is through religion and spirituality. And I know I've said it many times before, both here and in my clinical office. Science tells us that people that have a spiritual side to them, or a religion to express their spirituality, develop a moral code, moral compass, but they are just overall healthy individuals, and they're more equipped to deal with difficult times. They are more resilient. And here's the science that Dr. Southwick and Charney found. I love this passage because it quotes one of my professors, so that was really cool for me. Many people turn to religion or spirituality as a way to cope with hardship or trauma. Some find solace in formal religious services, while others seek inspiration and strength through individual spiritual practices that help them to connect with God or to find their place in the universe. It doesn't prescribe what or who you should believe in, but you should certainly believe in something, to understand that there's something greater than you. We talked about that. I talked about that in the last podcast on spirituality and the spiritual side of logotherapy. Here's my quote from the wonderful Dr. Ann Graber. In her 2009 book, The Journey Home, psychologist Ann Graber defines religion as a path to God, the source of being, right? And spirituality let's go back. A path to God. I think too many people, when we say God, imagine a bearded sky wizard that grants wishes, right? And that's just, I hate having that argument with people. That it's not good. Sorry. It's desensitizing, dehumanizing to people that believe, even from an atheistic perspective. That is kind of putting a human face on what is, as Dr. Graber here says, the source of being. We don't know where we come from. We've got ideas. We have the Big Bang Theory and evolution, but something greater than our ability to understand right now got this whole thing rolling. No, it wasn't a bearded sky wizard that goes around granting wishes, but there's something out there. There are things outside of our control that we don't understand. And seeking to understand or achieving acceptance of our own limitations is a very mature and healthy thing to do. And simply writing it off as non-scientific and stupid is just really kind of a immature way of dispensing with it, right? Or maybe a fearful way. I don't know. She defines as religion as a path to God, the source of being, right? So it's a path, it's activities, it's worship, and spirituality as the essential human endowment in which direct experience of God can take place. She observes that people may change their religion, but they retain their inherent spirituality. Religion and spirituality are of great importance in American culture and to other cultures around the globe. 2007 study says among Americans, 92% believe in God or a universal spirit. 81% believe in heaven. 70% believe in the devil and in hell. The U.S. Army even includes the spiritual dimension as one of the core strengths in its comprehensive soldier fitness program. A survey of 230 countries and territories by the PRE Research Center found that 84% of the world's population identified with a religion in 2010. Now, I believe that's contrary a little bit to maybe what I experienced or been told, but I think that's kind of refreshing in some ways. I mean, if we go back to having a moral code or compass, some people's moral code is the opposite of others, and some people's religion can be the opposite of others. I think we see that in different wars and terrorist attacks. But if we look at the positive, it definitely gives us something to call on for additional strength in difficult times. And before diving too deep into it, again, I talked about the whole spirituality of logotherapy in the last episode. Let's just look at some practical suggestions that they give us here. Set aside time for prayer or meditation as part of your daily routine. This could be a first thing, last thing, or both. I know for me, I look forward to my morning kind of prayer and meditation and spiritual readings. When I'm able to get up early and do that, it definitely makes for a better day. Make a regular habit out of reading scripture or sacred text or other writings pertaining to your chosen faith or practice. And again, maybe if you don't have a chosen faith or religion, you read many, or even philosophy or different ideas on it. Designate a physical place for your daily spiritual practice. I love this one because I thought, wow, my daily place is the couch with a cup of coffee. This may be a room or smaller space in your home or a location in nature. Love that idea. I find walking out in the backyard, or even taking a longer walk in the woods to be very spiritual. But this is funny. It might even be in your car. Those days where you can't find time to do it and you got 10, 20 minutes to get to work. Sometimes just silence instead of the radio or even a spiritual podcast can be helpful. Practice a physical active form of spirituality, such as a walking prayer, yoga, martial arts, Tai Chi, or a liturgical dance. That's combining the spiritual with the physical. Practice a creative form of spirituality, chanting, singing, playing sacred music, painting, or drawing with a goal of expressing sacred ideals or writing spiritually inspired poetry. And of course, become a part of a group that worships or practices together, such as a congregation, scripture study group, Bible study, prayer or meditation circle. Drum circles are a common way to do that. This community may come together in person or online. So, not to belabor the point, I know I talk about it often. Having a spiritual, logotherapy is spiritual. As I'm not sure I got to share this with you, but as the great Dr. Jordan Peterson said to me when I got to ask him this question when I saw him a couple of months ago, he said, logotherapy is Christianity. And I just sat back and I said, whoa, that was pretty heavy. And I've taken the past month, I think, to really think about that. But there are a lot of similar components to it. So to find what works for you, to find that religion or sense of spirituality, as I've said, you don't have to go to church. I do, but you can just go for a walk in the woods and find and recognize there's something greater than yourself out there. So factor 5, this is a pretty obvious one to me. Hopefully it is to you as well. Social support. Having social support in difficult times is key. To have other people around you to support you, to hold you up, or sometimes just to listen to you and be present with you. And the chapter in the book on social support goes into a great story of the tapping code used in very often in Vietnam and for prisoners of war. but I believe it originated back in the Korean War, where prisoners of war, American soldiers and sailors and pilots, would communicate using this amazing tapping code, not Morse code, but it was a little bit different, and how that connected them together. How many of them would say it was what kept them alive. My goodness, I get chills just talking about that. Just having that ability to recognize there's other human beings in a similar situation around you and with you was key to people staying alive, to soldiers staying alive for years. We're talking years in prisoner of war camps, right? If we go back to Dr. Frankl and his time in the concentration camps, we know that they had connection. They were in the same shacks together, in the same shacks, and that ability to connect was so important for many prisoners of the concentration camps to stay alive. To get to the summary of the chapter here, those who know how to build strong, positive social networks reap many benefits. Strong, positive relationships are associated with better physical health, protection against depression, and stress disorders such as PTSD, enhanced emotional well-being, and longer life. If you don't have somebody you can go have coffee with after listening to this podcast, if you don't have people in your life that you can talk to in good times, but especially in bad, I encourage you to start cultivating those relationships now. And as we know from the Myers-Briggs, for you introverts out there, just 1 or 2 deep relationships are important. And for us extroverts, many relationships, acquaintances and connections are helpful, but we too need to have those deep relationships, people that we can go talk to. Factor 6, similar to social support. Love this idea, and I almost, it seemed too common to even be specific there, but to have role models. I talk about that all the time, about finding mentors. My favorite example, Luke Skywalker had Yoda, right? Anakin had Obi-Wan. I'm going to go too deep into Star Wars there. I'm sorry. Happy, healthy people have mentors they can go to, right? Positive mentors. But here's something important as well. And I know I've said this to many people, some of you who might be listening. We often have negative role models as well. People in our lives that kind of showed us what not to do. Although we generally think of role models as providing positive examples to admire and emulate, sometimes a person stands out by embodying traits we emphatically do not want to adopt. We can think of such a person as a negative role model. The book goes on to say, during our work with various clients, we have often encountered people who were mistreated in childhood by one or both parents. Such individuals are often fiercely determined to live a life different from that of their abusers. Rather than imitate the negative behavior, they make a great effort to learn new, more positive behaviors. So seek positive role models, spend time with positive role models, and keep in mind that it's okay to have negative role models and to have that idea of this is something I do not want to do. It's helpful to remember, right? So here's some of the science behind it, that we learn from our role models by imitating their behavior. And as the book says, the neuroscience of this, the ability to imitate appears to be inborn. We know this. We know that babies imitate what is around them. Well, so do adults, right? So I think that's really important to recognize. We imitate, we become, I guess you can say, what is around us, those that are around us, we emulate them. And so we have to choose wisely those we spend time with. There are many books on that. Some of, you are the 5 or 10 people you spend the most time with. So choose wisely. And if the people you spend the most time with aren't the healthiest, ask them to get healthier. I mean, if we're talking about family or friends or people that you care about. On the other hand, if there are people that are that unhealthy that you need to avoid, maybe that's the way to do it too. Having positive role models, Knowing our negative role models, but also choosing our mentors and those we spend time with is a factor in overall health, but in resilience and recovering from difficult situations. Factor 7, pretty obvious one if you've listened to this podcast before. Physical fitness, strengthening. The chapter a lot of neuroscience and science behind this idea of it building resilience, but physical fitness improves overall brain health, right? And one of the things they talk about in physical fitness training here is not just the training, not just weightlifting or bike riding or running, but rest. Rest is so important. Healthy rest in between exercising, the right amount of sleep, and of course, if you're going to engage in physical fitness and strengthening, using food as fuel, eating healthy is key to building physical strength, but also mental, emotional strength, right? What we put in our body goes to our brain. And the more, phytonutrients and different things that we're able to get, the healthier our brain is. If you're getting regular meals out of a window at a brick building in your car, you are not helping. Obviously, you're not helping your physical fitness, but you're certainly not helping your brain fitness either. And that's the next factor that we talk about here is brain fitness. You can train your body, you can train your brain. I think we've seen that in the past few years with different apps like Luminosity and things like that that profess to improve brain health. And the chapter here talks a bit about that, but also says, look, you don't have to just go get an app to improve your brain fitness. There are other ways to do it. And now check this out. This is probably before I go to that quote, really quick, let's talk about the opening here. In challenging situations, it helps to be mentally sharp. The edge allows us to focus on the problem, process information quickly, remember what we already know about coping with related challenges, find strategies to solve the problem, make wise decisions, and learn new information. It also helps to regulate our emotions, to control them rather than being controlled by them in difficult situations. As I said, just as we can train our body to become fit and resilient, we can train our brain. And that goes back to that idea of neuroplasticity and how the brain grows and evolves when we challenge it, when we put it in new and interesting situations. As I said, you can get an app. I would like to think Words with Friends is helping my brain. It certainly frustrates me from time to time, but I'll play every once in a while. It's really cool that I get a chance to play with one of my former professors, and man, is she good. All right, so this is really cool for all you golfers out there. Pay attention the next time your spouse, your partner, your wife, your husband says, no, I don't think you can go play an extra round this weekend. Check this out. You get to use this. This is Dr. Dan's prescription from the podcast. Recently published brain imaging studies, pictures of the brain, have found that training in other skills, including juggling, which is kind of cool. If you ever try learning to juggle, it certainly tests your brain, and golf also leads to brain enlargement and task relevant brain regions. Golf makes your brain bigger. There you go. Structurally, training has consistently been associated with volumetric increases in brain structures thought to be critical for performance of the trained task. You don't have to go get an app to improve your brain. You can go golfing, or just learn any new skill. Woodworking, music is a great one. Learning new instruments, pick up the guitar or a handpan or something like that. But making the conscious decision to learn a new skill grows your brain. I highly recommend golf. The book goes on to say, so what can we recommend at this point? Making a habit of challenging your intellect can't hurt, although you may be equally able to boost your cognitive fitness and resilience by learning new things on your own as by buying a brain fitness program, right? One of my, I don't want to continue to make this about me, but I love this idea. This confirms something I kind of knew intuitively, but here's great brain research behind it. Something called attention restoration theory, ART, proposes that when our cognitive muscles become fatigued, a highly effective way to restore and recover is to unplug them by taking a walk in a park or along a body of water, or even just contemplating a mural. And so there's a study here, and I'm not sure what the test was that they gave these participants, but they gave these participants a pre and post test, and then took the pre-test. It was a cognitive ability test, sent them out into the woods for a 4-day hike, and they came back and retook the test. Participants scored a full 50% higher than their before hike peer groups. I say it all the time. If you're stressed, if you're struggling, if you're dealing with traumatic issues, get out into the woods. It can be spiritual, but it's just healing. There's something about being in nature, whether it's the oxygen or the air or all the beautiful sounds, or even sometimes the silence, can be so helpful for us. What else can we do to train our brain? Well, go back to factor 7, physical fitness. Physical conditioning also impacts brain fitness. These go hand in hand. The mind-body relationship is critical here, right? Mastering physical challenges can improve confidence, self-esteem. Overcoming physical adversity can help to foster mental toughness. I think that's a great example that the client shared with me this week. I believe it was also the saying no client about running, right? So running or biking, or when we engage in a kind of a distance, even a short distance sport or activity, there's oftentimes we feel like quitting. And one of the ways to train your brain is to say, no, I'm going to get to the next corner. And then I'm going to get to that area, that next place. There's a quote I have somewhere around here, and I can't remember who it's by. It's by a famous runner that says, my muscles are pieces of rubber, but my mind is everything that I am, right? And so developing your mind through physical activity, teaching your mind to command your body to say, nope, just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Now, there's a dangerous side to that too, in overtraining, and I think the book actually talks about that. You don't want to push too far to injury. So there is a healthy balance to be had there. This was a fascinating part. They do talk about when we're still in brain fitness, but it's amazing how much physical fitness interrelates with that. It says here, once the skills have been taught, it takes discipline to maintain and improve upon them. This is true for cognitive training, emotional regulation training, mindfulness training, and physical training. Rigorous training is never easy. Thoughts and emotions can easily sabotage our best intentions. That is where discipline, drive, and consistency come in. I was talking to another client this week about triathlon training, and he said to me, he said, everything's really going great in life except that one thing, right? Which is a big thing if you're going to go do a triathlon. But sometimes the fact that everything is going well, work is going well, business going well, family, it needs our attention to keep going well. And so there really is a balance to be had there, right? And one of those balances, if we go here, I love this, is accepting failure in that training, to be able to look at that. It says here, failure is an education. It educates you by telling you that something is not working and that it's time to try something new, time to make an adjustment. And that's from Mental Toughness by Carl Kuehl. When you're struggling in an area, it's a balance. It's a failure, and it's okay to fail. I say that all the time. It's okay to fail, but it is a way to look and say, all right, what do I need to do differently? The book here says, so here's some practical ideas to take responsibility for your own brain fitness. Some of these are kind of cute. These are interesting. I may give them a try. There's a book that they reference here called Keep Your Brain Alive, 83 Neurobic. Yeah, well, that's cute. Mixes neurology and aerobics. Keep Your Brain Alive, 83 Neurobic Exercises by Duke University neurobiologist Lawrence C. Katz and Manning Rubin. So becoming more resilient may require training in multiple areas, such as mindfulness, meditation, physical strength, education. Some of the ways that Keep Your Brain Alive, 83 Neurobic Exercises recommend brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. I want you to take a week and try. Boy, that just bothers me to even think about what that might be like, but it's going to be uncomfortable. But if something so simple can improve your brain health, why wouldn't you? Getting dressed with your eyes closed. Here's a cool one. They recommend challenging exercises like teaching yourself to read Braille well enough to use an elevator with your eyes closed. How cool would that be? These activities activate new pathways in your brain. By placing ourselves in environments that are conducive to learning, by surrounding ourselves with people who stimulate our personal growth, and by systematically practicing specific desired skills, we have the capacity to influence the structure and function of our brain. You make your brain bigger, larger, faster, stronger by doing these things. By brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand this week, you're going to improve your health. Factor 9, cognitive and emotional flexibility. And I think this kind of relates to brain fitness, but being in control of your emotions. I don't even know if it's control. Knowing how to relate to our emotions, right? People who are resilient tend to be flexible in the way they think about challenges and flexible in the way they react emotionally to stress, right? We're not responsible for our first initial thought. That can come from anywhere. It's often an impulse that we don't know where it came from, what stimulated it, but we are responsible for the next thought and for the emotions that it causes, right? We are responsible for our emotions. We can change our emotions with our behavior. These resilient people, are not wedded to a specific style of coping. Instead, they shift from one coping strategy to another, depending on the circumstances. Many are able to accept, that's key, acceptance. Many are able to accept what they cannot change, to learn from failure, to use emotions like grief and anger to feel compassion and courage, and to search for opportunity and meaning in adversity. Wow. Hopefully those sound familiar to you if you've been listening to this podcast. I hope so. It goes on to talk about acceptance. That is right out of some of logotherapy's greatest works, right? The important component of cognitive flexibility is accepting the reality of our situation, even if that situation is frightening and painful. As Dr. Frankl says, life has meaning under all circumstances, even the most miserable. And by being able to reflect on that, to recognize that there is meaning in this situation, meaning in this moment, we can accept it and we can move forward with it and recognize life isn't always about what we want, but sometimes we have to adapt to what we get. You can change what you can, but you can always change your attitude or choose your attitude in difficult situations. One of the ways they suggest doing this is what they call positive reappraisal, similar to optimism, which is simply just looking at a situation from a different way, looking at a negative situation with positive reframing. Gratitude is a way to do that, right? Counting your blessings, as they say, just looking for the positives, being thankful for what we have. There's serious reams and volumes of neuroscientific research that tells us gratitude, the conscious willing act of gratitude, is just so helpful in difficult situations, but especially just good for our brain. And one of my favorites, humor. We talk about, I think it was just the last podcast, talked about humor being one of the tools of the soul, right? And now there's neuroscientific research that says humor is good for our brain, good for helping us deal with things. I work with a family struggling with aging, debilitated parents, and the siblings have to find humor in that, even in these very difficult and what could be dark situations. They're able to laugh and joke and support each other, and even to joke with their aging parents. And I think that's truly beautiful. Finding humor in difficult situations really is an important tool in the human soul. Finally, factor 10, and hopefully you're not surprised this one. An entire chapter, one way or several ways to build resilience is by finding meaning, purpose, and growth in your life. I'm not going to dive too deep into that one because there are 50 or 60 podcasts prior to this talking all about those things. And it was really refreshing, I guess. I don't know. It was really cool for me to read through this chapter. So many highlights from Man's Search for Meaning or different books in logotherapy. Dr. Graeber, they talk about it here. Nietzsche, he who has a why can endure almost any how. Carl Jung, the classic psychologist from Man and His Symbols, writes that man can stand the most incredible hardships when he is convinced that they make sense. Right? They also talk about Nelson Mandela here, and of course, here's a quote from Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, who wrote, "Deep down, in my opinion, man is dominated neither by the will to pleasure, as proposed by Freud, nor by the will to power, from Alfred Adler, but what I like to call man's will to meaning. That is to say, his deep-seated striving and struggling for a higher and ultimate meaning to his existence." It's wonderful to see how modern neuroscientific research coalesces so well, agrees so well with logotherapy and what we talk about here so very often. The book wraps up with these few ideas. It is up to you to take responsibility for resilience. As we've said here before, we all know we will find difficult times in life. My hope for you is that you never experience a trauma. That is to say, something that happens to you that brings you cause or concern to fear for your life. But if you do, you can be prepared for it. Those difficult times, you can be prepared for it. You can train for it, as we've said here. It's really, honestly, it's just good mental health and wellness. It's living that life of balance between mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, vocational, and relational health, right? Having a balance there, attending to those things, trying to grow each day in them. So I want to sum up. The book shares some quick ways, right? So we talked about for the individual to build resilience, foster optimism, face your fears, solidify, study, learn, and grow your moral compass, practice religion and spirituality, attract and give social support, imitate resilient role models, and know who your negative role models are. Engage in physical training, mental and emotional training, work on your cognitive and emotional flexibility, and of course, find meaning, purpose, and opportunities to grow in your life. That you can do as an individual. Now it goes on. There are some cool things here about using these in a family, right? So family therapists may encourage the use of one or more of these processes when helping a family through a crisis. Here we go again. Making meaning of adversity, maintaining a positive outlook, right? There's that optimism there. Fostering transcendence and spirituality. You all know what transcendence is, right? That ability to step outside ourselves to help others. Practicing flexibility, enhancing connectedness in the family, drawing on social and even economic resources, achieve clarity, express emotions openly, and solving problems collaboratively. So those are some of the things that we can take from the individual work and use in our families, especially if our family is struggling with trauma. I hope that was as meaningful for you as it was for me. I know when I heard about Dr. Southwick's passing, I had this book on the shelf for a while. I had skimmed it. I said, I owe it to myself, but also to you to really dive deep into it. And it is a fascinating and beautiful book, so well written, so well researched. If you have any interest in it, I will certainly include a link in the show notes or the show description. As always, it is my pleasure to bring a little bit of mental health and meaning to your day. Thank you for this opportunity for me to find meaning in sharing it with you. Take care.